Let's look at the news.
There's disgust and disbelief among residents on Sylvan Court in Manorville after hearing a law enforcement officer and neighbor is accused of committing a hate crime on their block.
That's 90% of the cops in Long Island.
New York detective charged with hate crime after exploding on black cellular service worker using racial slur. As if we don't have enough to deal with.
The victim, in his SUV when the detective approached him, damaged his car and then let loose with a racial slur.
Now, that worker is black.
The victim, who is black.
Murphy harassed the man who's black.
The Long Island detective was charged with a hate crime on Wednesday after he called a phone service worker the N-word and spewed, "We don't want you or your kind in the neighborhood," in a racist tirade, according to officials. Well, assuming that's accurately relayed, dang, they got him.
Police detective John Murphy is charged with harassing a cellular phone company worker due to the color of his skin.
So like 7 p.m. on the East Coast in November, it would probably be a bit dark. I mean, I wouldn't have called the guy a slur, but I probably would have been suspicious too if I see necessarily well, no, I wouldn't have been because it's a nice neighborhood actually, and yeah, you see a service vehicle with a siren on it. It's pretty clear that whoever's in it, they probably have some sort of job to do. So yeah, I guess he needed an outlet to express his inner demons around black people, and he just ran into an opportunity.
This is probably the best block in Manorville, and I couldn't imagine anybody on my block doing this or saying anything like that.
He used a racial slur and kicked the vehicle door, causing damage.
And ripped off a light affixed to the top of the vehicle before breaking it into pieces and chucking it at the victim. Yikes! Hitting the left side of his face. Moments before the violent altercation, Murphy, who was off duty, allegedly asked the victim what he was doing in the neighborhood while identifying himself as law enforcement. But when the worker tried to hand over his ID, Murphy refused to look at it.
The victim, who is black, attempted to show his company identification and explain what he was doing.
I have seen so many videos where black people just refuse to hand over their IDs and then just pops off. And then this guy's literally handing you his ID and you just refuse to see it. It's incredible.
It was a disturbing encounter that this cell phone technician says he was not expecting.
The victim here was just trying to do his job, and the defendant allegedly harassed him and damaged his vehicle.
It's disappointing anytime, but when a public official, especially a police officer involved, it's especially disconcerting.
I would hate to be this guy's defense attorney. I mean, it's pretty clear-cut to me that Murphy is not one of the good ones. Officers. It was much more hostile and unreasonable an encounter than what the average person would have done, even without the slur. But we may have another unsung hero, because this guy, while being the victim of an absurdity, did not exploit his victimhood for notoriety. He's sharing his story as he has the right to, but he's not attempting to politicize the incident into a grander, misdirecting narrative about the preeminent threats facing Black America. So that's pretty cool. This is a crappy thing that happened, but I always remember that there are plenty of stories that legacy media never really covers because, as always, black lives only matter when there's a white person or a cop involved. This skewed and selective news coverage that sensationalizes particular hate crimes while ignoring basically everything else only serves to bolster minorities as victims of whitey, which is a much more comfortable narrative for legacy media outlets to fall back on. It helps them avoid difficult conversations, not so much about black people, but about the people who claim to stand for black people. As far as motive for this detective, maybe a Tyrone made a move on his wife and he has some pent-up resentment about that. I don't care. You can't be taking whatever your deal is out on random ninjas. Join a gym!
He started with his racial slurs, tirades, calling me out. Then he used the, you know what, right? The N-word, right?
This guy has a job, and by his attitude and accent, he sounds potentially like an immigrant. One who's respected this country since before he immigrated to it. You should pay him some respect back. He's not some mentally disturbed homeless loiterer with a knife out on bail reform 24 hours ago. These are the people who you should not be afraid of.
Everyone knows driving while black is a crime in America.
Please, give me a break.
A screaming red flag. Out of 144 civilian complaints, Nassau County Police claim 0 have any merit.
Well, this was Suffolk County, but I take the point.
Vintage American racism.
Don't you make those black kids angry. Average Trump supporter.
Vintage? This is modern-day current racism.
Which this nation was literally founded upon. Exactly. This is not new.
Oh, forget all these shady bitches.
The second comment is what we call a noticer, but here he's just trolling, I guess. Some of them tend to be radicalized, though, by all the junk food media that creates the rest of these comments.
And I don't care what your status is in life, and this gentleman happened to be a detective in another police department in Rockville Centre, but that doesn't excuse hate.
Murphy pleaded not guilty at his arraignment.
I mean, I'm not unreasonable. Like, I would have been suspicious in a certain context, like, ooh, a scary black guy. Sometimes black people unalive other black people. It's been known to happen from time to time. So it's not like there's just zero risk if it's dark and you don't recognize anybody. But this was clearly demarcated as a service vehicle, so dude was just itching to get his fix in.
He said nothing to reporters' questions while leaving the courthouse in Central Hyslop on Wednesday.
Officer or not, if something makes you this ugly against a non-violent person, get some help. Like, subscribe, and support the show, and as always, beware the victim politicized.